the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Would you all make sure that your phones are either turned off or on silent, please? Okay, Mr. Vinnerman, do you want to start with presentations?
Great. I'm going to have Mr. Carter introduce our presenters for the evening.
So we have with us to present on our efforts for Seal of Biliteracy, Ms. Smith, Ms. Pitts, and Ms. Mazurka. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. The Seal of Biliteracy has been offered here for over 5 years. However, this is new for me, and it's been a great learning experience this year. And so this year, when I was here in January, we talked a lot about how it was really setting up the systems. And one of the systems that we need to have in place is to have a Seal of Biliteracy committee that is required by the state. And so the state says you must have at least 5 members of that committee. And so one of them being the Seal of Biliteracy coordinator, which is my job. And so I kind of do the paperwork and do a lot of the behind the scenes things. I was also had the privilege to go and to observe when students were doing their presentations in both Spanish and also English. So that was very cool. Administration, Mr. Carter has been present and is part of our committee, so he helps support students and can also be an advisor. And I know he was excited to have some students ask him to be an advisor this year to help them through their projects. Ms. Kasker is our guidance counselor and to help promote that, and we did actually add it to our catalog this year. So as students are going through the courses, it is in there. Our world language teachers who are with us today, they are going to help recruit Seal of Biliteracy candidates. They're advisors, and also they are the panelists, so they are the ones that score them. Our ELA teacher is Mrs. Donna Brooks, who teaches 11th grade English, and she also helps identify students for the Seal and helps promote the projects. And then if we were to have an annual teacher, that would be our 6th person, but we don't happen to have one this year. So the Seal of Biliteracy can help provide students with more opportunities for college, for careers, and even for travel. So to achieve the Seal of Biliteracy, students need 3 points in English and 3 points in a world language. So there's more opportunity to earn points in English. In our world language right now, we only have the first bullet, which is to receive an 85% or higher at the checkpoint C, which is either in 11th grade, which is used to be called Spanish 4, or in 12th grade, which is Spanish 5. So it's either or, and then a culminating project. But in the future, we're looking to add a world language exam to give students another opportunity to earn the Seal. So again, this year has really been trying to just get systems in place and get this started. So new things this year from previous years when we offered the Seal has been actually having a Seal of Biliteracy committee. And as a committee, we meet monthly. And so we work on recruiting students and just the program. New things this year for students has been that they've been able to have an advisor of their choosing to help them through the project. We also sent a letter to parents of seniors in December to let them know that they were working towards earning this. And at the end of the year, we will send one to juniors who have already achieved all the points necessary for English. So this year we had 5 successful candidates reach the Seal of Biliteracy. So the medallions, and they also get a seal on their diploma, which actually came in today. So we are very excited about that. And they'll get to wear the medallions at graduation. We also, in the near future, are going to be having a celebration for them where they'll get to pick a special guest to also come and celebrate their achievements, and they'll be honored at an award ceremony. So for juniors, they're working towards it. So again, we have 10 students that have currently met the English requirements this year by giving the Regents exam in January to all juniors. We already know that they've earned that points for that, so we have 10 that earned that point, and then they were able to do a project in the English class that also counted. So the research project was of their choosing. I was able to go in and observe them and be one of the panelists. So that was very cool because I had those students when they were in 6th grade. So to see the growth and maturity in them was just amazing to see. except for one student I didn't get to score because maybe I was related to him. So one of my other coaches stepped in and did that one. But it was just a fascinating projects that they have. So for next steps, we're going to continue to reflect and refine on this since this is kind of a new process for us. But we want to continue to promote and maybe start with like freshmen and sophomores and how can we get more people and more students involved. Refine the system for choosing advisors, just making sure that students are meeting with those advisors throughout their projects. And, just reflecting on the process as a whole and continue to make changes as we need to go. No questions?
Quick question. So you said there are 10 juniors who met the requirement this year for ELA. Are all 10 of them looking to get it next year?
They are.
Okay.
Yes.
So we'll go potentially from 5 this year to 10 next year?
Potentially, yes, correct, yeah.
Anybody else?
Also, a little shameless plug, I know Mr. Carter and I just spoke, so those 5 individuals in the picture that Ms. Smith just showed, unfortunately, they were not able to be here tonight because many of them are at the Envirothon competition, the state Envirothon competition, representing us in another capacity. So really, another great example of kind of the well-roundedness and, just how involved so many of our students are in a number of areas. So just kind of a shout out to them.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to see the regular meeting minutes for the April 24th meeting. Could I have a motion, please? Thank you, Mrs. Kaiser, and a second by Mrs. Folds. Any questions, corrections? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moving on. I would take D, the financial reports 1 through 4, if someone would give me a motion. We need to separate them. Mrs. Kaiser, second. Perfect, thank you. Second, Mrs. Folds. Any questions on this group? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moving on. I haven't taken another glance at this consent agenda, but I would be willing to take a motion for all unless we need to. Anybody related to anyone today?
There weren't any,
There wasn't any change.
right, no.
Not that I know, right, I just hadn't looked at it today, so that's why I just,
No changes.
no additions, yeah.
Motion.
For the entire consent agenda,
Second.
so thank you. Any questions? Everybody's really tired. Everybody awake? All right, when you're ready.
Yes. Mrs. Decker? Yes. Mrs. Bliss?
Yep.
Mrs. Dingman?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser?
Yes.
Mrs. Allen?
Yes.
Mrs. Foltz?
Yes.
And Mrs. Madigan?
Yes, thank you. F, new business. Anybody wanna give me some numbers here?
Can we go all of them or
I think we should pull out maybe the meeting schedule, because I think.
maybe 21?
I would agree.
Okay.
So I'll motion F1 through 20.
I have a second for that.
-2?
Wait, isn't 20? Oh, sorry.
So you mean 21.
Maybe we're not awake.
Wow. I thought it was
1
only 2.
and then 3 through 21.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Second by Mrs. Decker.
I'm not even tired.
There's a lot of the same words that are in both of those, so.
Thanks for that.
It's the prints a little smaller this week. Okay,
Question.
yes.
In regard to the second, our first read for repeal policy 5130, I was just, I guess, wondering, and I'm sorry I didn't get to ask this earlier, but, what is changing that we're repealing that in terms of the budget adoption?
So this was the policy that we discussed a little bit last time as a whole board. Erie One was recommending either some revisions to it to combine a couple policies. When we reviewed that as a committee, these are all governed by law. So the conversation that we had as a group last meeting was that if it was governed by law, was it redundant to have it also in policy, I believe.
Thank you. And the same goes for, I think there was a second reading about web policy, that something was changing in terms of, was that also like a law? I think we had discussed that as well, the law that okay.
You are correct, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I had a question about 20, the curriculum adoption. So my question was just, and if I read this correctly, I think this is a policy. But when we do a new curriculum, it has to be 5 years implemented with fidelity. Is that what I'm reading? That's a board policy. Like no
That's
changes, no exceptions, no nothing.
so that's what has been in our board policy, yes.
Okay.
Did you have a thought on that?
I only question, 5 years is a long time. It's not a long time, but it's a long time to follow something with absolute fidelity. If you know after year 3 something's not working and a teacher needs to implement or add something or change something, or I struggle with the idea of
Yeah.
very verbatim curriculum.
And there is language in that policy that does allow I'll say an out clause really
Okay.
for the district or for the board at that year 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, to revisit that conversation.
Okay.
I think it really stems from trying to create a sense of stability in direction of where we're going academically, and not just responding on a whim on a year-to-year basis to a new trend or a new fad with regard to, you know, the hottest topic in teaching reading strategies, for instance, that may not be grounded or rooted in scientific evidence-based practices.
Okay.
Mr. Hanneman, do you have that policy number by chance? Not to put you on the spot, but I know I just did. Sorry.
It was in the.
I don't have it. It was in my transmittal, 8110 and 8320, I believe. And again, this really stemmed, this has been over a year-long process. We started last year, we contracted out with BOCES, Debbie Baker, who had come in and had worked with teams of our teachers in both ELA and math on a program review at both the elementary levels and then at the middle and high school levels as well. And so when we kind of got to the end of last school year, it was like, now what's the next step? And with Jen's position this year and some of the coaches, they've been able to take that program review work and dive into making some recommendations, looking at various forms of curriculum and types of curriculum, reviewing them for fidelity, reviewing them for practicalness. They've spent a lot of time this year kind of diving into each one of those, and I'm sure Jen can elaborate a little bit more on some of the steps that they've used.
I have some additional questions before
Oh.
she wants to dive into it.
Sure.
So you indicated that the BOCES helped with this, the ELA picking this out.
No,
No,
they did not help with picking this out. They helped us as a group of educators review what we currently have done and what we were currently using and matching that against, you know, statewide standards and expectations.
So what other curriculums did you look at for ELA?
So this year, that's where Jen can jump into. Last year, they did not spend any time reviewing other curriculums.
So we, on the March Superintendent Day, reviewed Houghton Mifflin's Into Reading and Into Literature. We reviewed CKLA, Amplify CKLA, we reviewed Wit and Wisdom from Great Minds. There were a couple other smaller companies in there, but those were the major ones in addition to Imagine Learning, EL Education. Our biggest priority through this process was to move our curriculum to be aligned with the Next Gen Learning Standards. What we were using previously was not aligned with the Next Gen standards, and it was very hodgepodge. We were trying to meet all of the pieces of the science of reading with different curriculum, different approaches. So if each piece that we were using was implemented with fidelity, it would take over 3 hours out of every school day to teach ELA alone. Our elementary classrooms don't have time for that, so by unifying with one program, our hope is to be able to fit all of that into our regular literacy block each day.
So the lessons that are given then, the timeline for that, like say an Amplify lesson is 90 minutes, and you know you're not teaching that 90 minutes in real life. These are like 60 minutes or?
Nope, these are 90 minutes. We have in our elementary master schedule for next year a 90-minute block for ELA in every grade level. In addition to that, there's a 30-minute ELA block. So there's an optional piece in Imagine Learning that they call an all block that will be used to supplement during the AIS time as well. There are less than 180 lessons. The same is true of Eureka Squared. So Eureka for math is a 60-minute lesson. Our elementary schedule has 60 minutes each day built in for math, and there's depending on the grade level, between 130 and 140 lessons. So just like this year when we did our priority standards work, our teachers went through their scope and sequence and pacing guides and said, okay, this week we're teaching a priority standard, it's 38% of the state assessment, so we're going to take a couple extra days on this lesson. So once we get that new curriculum in, we'll be doing that same thing to adjust our pacing guides to make sure that those priority standards we're really diving deeper on. So both of these options for ELA and math give us the flexibility to be able to do that and dive in deeper on each piece. And to your question about making adjustments, our plan for year one is to go through our elementary classrooms and middle school as well and box up all of the hodgepodge materials that we've been using over the last few years. Our teachers know that that's coming. We'll store them for a year so that year one we are implementing completely with fidelity. At the end of year one, if a teacher says, you know, when I teach CVC words, there's a certain tool or a certain lesson from Really Great Reading that I would like to supplement with, they'll give us those requests and their reasoning for that. We'll review those as curriculum council with our lead teachers to say, is this something we feel is necessary? And then any adjustments like that per the policy will come back and say, all right, we're looking for 2/3 vote to approve these amendments at this point.
Okay.
But our hope in aligning with that policy is to also support that fidelity of instruction so that what we're seeing right now is a lot of, okay, this lesson is on the introduction to geometry. So if someone says to me, I'm teaching module 5, lesson 3, certainly when I go into Observe, I'm going to pull up the lesson plan for module 5, lesson 3, and what's happening in the classroom is nowhere near what's in the lesson plan. So our biggest need with new curriculum is going to be that fidelity of implementation across every single classroom. So that will be what you'll hear from us next year with every presentation, fidelity, fidelity, fidelity.
Did I hear you correctly? You said 90 minutes of ELA in every grade
No.
In the elementary building.
in the elementary building?
And they have an additional 30-minute AIS period for ELA as well. So total 120 minutes each day for ELA instruction.
So it's continuous 90 minutes?
For all except one grade level. One has a break in between.
So, and I don't know exactly what the curriculum looks like, but I know that
there's a big concern about kids and their attention span as it is these days. And to take the block of time that you're spending with kids and adding more time to it, I'm just hopeful that there are segments in there that allow that break, because kids they're accustomed to these TikTok videos and everything, so they've got like a 30-second attention span. So you're gonna get like 15, 20 minutes out of them.
Yep, so within a daily lesson, there are different strands and different parts of the lesson, so there will be those opportunities for natural breaks.
Okay.
One of the other, our second choice for ELA curriculum, Amplify CKLA, has a 60-minute knowledge block that our feedback from other districts implementing that was that it was really, really difficult for kindergarten, first grade students to sit and attend for that length of time. So that was one thing that weighed into this decision between the two. They both, score similarly for the research reports behind them, but that ease of implementation and knowing what our students need. Both meet all of the standards, all of the skills, but the format of one was more appealing based a lot on exactly what you just talked about.
Thanks. Sorry, Stephanie.
No, you're okay. So this ELA curriculum, it's 90 minutes for a lesson, and you're saying that there's 120 minutes of ELA instruction a day. So for that extra 30-minute block, are they supposed to be doing something else, or is it they can take what they didn't finish from that 90 minutes? Because in the real world, you're not getting all of that done in 90 minutes. Or is there something else you're supposed to do? I just worry when I hear teaching with fidelity, people are going to rush through, like, I have to get this, and kids are lost, but there's no time to slow down.
Yep, so what's in there are a couple of optional pieces within that 90-minute piece where it says adjust here. So one piece that we're looking at in the elementary schedule next year is an additional weekly planning period where teams will meet with one of the instructional coaches or myself to ensure that those optional pieces, they're all making the same adjustments.
Okay.
So we don't want you to drop A and Kate to drop B and Stephanie to drop C. We want that to all be consistent across the team.
Okay.
So that all block is that completely optional piece. They don't require you to purchase that, but given its alignment to the skills in our AIS time, we're looking to add that as well, so that what students are receiving in their AIS time is aligned with what they're doing in core instruction.
Okay.
I have a two-part question. Did we have any teachers who trialed this year in our own district, or we've just kind of talked to teachers outside the district?
So we completed our review process internally. We did not do a pilot of either one.
Okay. Did we get any input from teachers on what they thought of the program, or what did that process look like?
So the staff did the program review last year where they went through what we're currently doing and identified needs within that.
Okay.
This year we focused on priority standards and where those are being taught in our current curriculum, so that when we looked at options, they could say, all right, if this standard is 38% of the test, I want to look at the lesson specifically for that standard and what do they look like. So teams also in the elementary school this year, they did a book study on the knowledge gap, which talks about organization of curriculum, which presents a very different approach than what we are currently using with Wonders as our core curriculum in the elementary school. So on the March Superintendent Conference Day, teachers had a rubric to work through for all of the options for math and the options for ELA. Some teams took those back afterward to do a little bit more in-depth review. From those rubrics, I went through and totaled up the scores to narrow it down to the top 2 for each one. We then had full bells and whistles, sales pitch presentations on each of those so our teachers could see the online platform. Usually, of late, those are very involved platforms, so being able to sit through that presentation allows them to see, well, these are the things that are going to be possible after we get some training and know how to use it. So they had that on both, and then they had a survey to complete on both ELA and math to give their overall feedback. After that, I met with a couple of the teams who were less clear in what they wanted or what their preference was to get a little more feedback. And then from all of that data, I think I grew some new gray hairs of determining what was the next best step. But it's all based on each of those steps and the review and input from our staff.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
How many of your teachers have been letters trained?
Other than our teachers who started this year, I believe all of our elementary teachers have had letters 1, and we have around 10 to 15 who are letters 2 trained.
Okay. And then you indicated that this curriculum for ELA aligns with the science of reading, especially in the primary grades?
Yes.
Okay. And then what other curriculums did you look at?
So Amplify from CKLA was our
Okay, so
second
that,
choice. Hope and Mifflin into reading, Great Minds, Wit and Wisdom. There were a few others, but those were the front runners for feedback.
And so why this one? Is that-
So working through that process, that rose to the top for having the best feedback. I think the other piece in the final decision-making was that this aligns with what we're asking our students by third and beyond to perform or have outputs for with our state assessments. The rigor that we're expecting at those grade levels is definitely here. We also were really committed to finding a consistent curriculum that we could use across all of the grade levels. We had a lot of conversation about, do we do Amplify CKLA for some grade levels and then switch over? But that consistency across all grade levels was one of the biggest pieces that came out of our program review as a need for us to address.
And then do you know any other districts that are currently using or adopting this?
I could get that list and send that to you. I have a list from our BOCES of what everyone is using.
But not this program?
Yes, but I can go get that from a list to have Matt share back with you of who's using both of them, ELA and Matt.
But we've gotten good feedback from the people that have been using them.
So as a point of consistency or reference, these are both the updated version of the New York State modules. So our current middle school staff is implementing the old ELA modules. So these have been updated, there's new text, they're realigned based on the new standards, but that level of rigor and expectation is still evident in these, the updated versions.
So when we implement the new system, what happens if a kid comes into a grade and they're not at grade level?
So we still have our tier 2 process, so any student across grades K through 8 is doing their fall diagnostic testing, their middle of the year diagnostic testing, and end of the year, the things that Haley has presented about. So when we have a new student move in, right when they get here, they still do their diagnostic testing so we can get a read on where they are. And then during their AIS time, they're placed according to their needs. So our tier 1 core instruction in the regular classroom is consistent for all students. There are pieces in the curriculum of how to differentiate and meet those different needs within your classroom. But those specific skill gaps that I believe you're referencing are what we focus in on during our AIS time. So those tier 2 processes where they're analyzing their data, meeting every 6 weeks and doing progress monitoring, those pieces will all continue next year as well.
And you said that extra 30 minutes, I think it was 20 or 30 minutes AIS, that's daily?
Yes.
Other questions?
I have one more, and then I'm really done. I'm assuming that the coaches will be part of this, but do we have supports for teachers? Because what I don't wanna see happen is people get frustrated with it and then like throw the towel in. So do we have supports built in to help the teachers if they're getting frustrated or?
Yeah, so all of our staff will have training throughout the summer and throughout the year next year to help their implementation. But my plan at this point is that our coaches will have extra additional above and beyond training so that they we call it train the trainer training, so that they really have that expertise that when someone is getting to that point of feeling frustrated, they say, let me show you, here it is. The other piece that we're working on with our coaches is preparing some of those materials and resources to come alongside and help our staff with that. So focusing on the knowledge topics of each grade level. For instance, kindergarten's first unit is about toys, that's the theme. So our coaches will go through and pull some resources, books from our book room, ideas of field trips that they can take to build that knowledge outside of the classroom. So trying to take some of those pieces off our teachers so they can focus on just the lift and implementation of the new curriculum. So having our coaches through this process, my hope is that we then have those eyes and ears in each grade level meeting where when they are getting to that place of frustration, the coaches are really great about coming back and reporting and saying, whoa, hold on, we've got to go meet with this team and support them, let's get to the bottom of it. So their support will be very instrumental in a successful implementation of the curriculum.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I just want to say, I think it's important to know because academics is a huge point of contention in this district lately. That next year when we get your reports and stuff, don't be surprised if scores are not amazing yet. It's gonna take a couple of years of a new curriculum before it kind of pans out. So I just think people need to be aware of that this isn't it's not snap of the fingers and everything's great. It's still gonna take time.
We've done a lot of work this year to put the systems in place for this process to be successful. Really getting to that place of being data driven and analyzing the data as we go through will be really important to us with this new curriculum, but you're absolutely right.
I just struggle when I hear that teachers aren't doing what they're supposed to, teachers aren't doing their job, teachers are not teaching, teachers are, whatever. But it's important that people know that if we're going to move in another direction, that there has to be some wait time. It's not a teacher problem, it's not a curriculum problem, it's a system problem. So you just have to figure out how to get through it.
Right. And I think that a lot of the work this year with the professional development and that knowledge gap book study especially has created an overwhelming sense of buy-in organically from our staff to say, all right, this is a knowledge building curriculum, we're all in. We, as a team, we read this book, we unpacked what it means to have a knowledge building curriculum, and some of the feedback from staff on that professional development was very encouraging to me to see the I statements of when we adopt a new knowledge building curriculum, I will implement it with fidelity. I understand the importance of this, I'm all in. So that prep work gives me a lot of hope for our staff moving forward, that they will come in with feelings of persistence because they've done that legwork to know the importance of what lies ahead.
Anybody else?
I really don't know.
Thank you,
I
Jen.
never comment on anything.
You just save them all up for now. Okay, if there are no other questions, when you're ready.
Okay. Mrs. Foltz?
Yes.
Mrs. Allen?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser?
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman?
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss?
Yes.
Mrs. Decker? And Mrs. Madigan?
Yes, thank you. Okay, I'd like to take a motion for F2, the meeting schedule, actually to table, but I'd like to discuss it for a minute, so could I have a motion for that? Thank you, Mrs. Foltz, and a second by Mrs. Decker. So there have been some questions about some of the dates on here and some conflicting times for certain board members. So what I'm wondering is this doesn't need to be approved tonight. And I'm thinking that if everyone could send in any conflict that hasn't already, with any dates on the schedule, maybe we could try to make some adjustments to that.
Would it be beneficial to just table this until the July meeting when the new board is here?
So we need it before July though. And my plan would be if we could get these dates together and then potentially send them out to anyone new that it might affect. We could also see if there's any conflict for any new board members. But I think that, I know that one person has an early conflict, so I'd like to do this as soon as we could, if possible. And I think probably what we'll do is if there's no restrictions on adjusting a little bit, we'll try to make an adjustment if it accommodates everyone. Not saying that we can do it for every date or every conflict, but we could try. So would that work for everybody? Okay, so I would just say like in the next couple of days, if you haven't sent in any conflict, if you wanna send it to Matt and myself, we can try to make some changes. All right?
So a question on the number of meetings, the reduction, just what the thought is behind.
So, last year, we had talked about, well, this year, last year to some people, this school year, we had talked about that, there, possibly wasn't a need for quite as many meetings as that we had originally scheduled. And then the thought was if additional meetings needed to be added, that we could. If there's something that's jumping out at you, but sometimes it's a little bit easier to start with a little bit shorter of a list and make additions when necessary.
I'm supportive of fewer meetings. Once a month is perfect.
You don't like to see less nails?
She's kidding, she actually sent me an email that said I'd like to meet 3 times a month.
It's a lie.
But so, out of these, like I said, if you could let us know, or if something, again, steps out that maybe something needs to be added. Okay, does that sound all right?
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll say by Friday, if possible, please. Okay, so we'll table that, thank you. Mr. Norman,
I'm sorry, I was itching my eye.
you're slowing me down.
You might use
Admin.
Coca-Cola at this point.
Admin reports.
Yes.
Are
Any
there-
questions on those? Any questions on the admin reports? I'll do that while you get to the right page. Okay. Mr. Lenore?
Yeah, I just wanted to, publicly acknowledge, again, the overwhelming support from our community last night at our budget vote. We had, as we send out on social media last night and on our website, and then again on Parent Square this morning, email to our faculty and staff as well, just to make sure everybody was receiving this information. The budget last night, the budget was approved by 85%, 370 yes, 67 no's, which is 85%, rounded up to 85%. And, when I looked across the Wayne Finger Lakes region, which is where we are, that was the second highest approval rating, second only to SOTUS, who had 86%. So, what an outstanding response, both in total numbers. The vote totals were up over compared to previous years, so it's great that the community feels welcome and interested to come in and vote on behalf of the school. And to vote in such a favorable result really speaks to, I think, the work that the board, our business office, our teachers, everybody is doing, working in one direction, kind of with one vision going forward. So similarly, we actually had a little bit of an increase above 85% for both the capital reserve fund and the school bus vote. We're both a little bit over 87%. And then the library, the Red Creek Library received about an 80% approval rating. So again, looking across the region, most other schools, there were only 4 schools in the 80s for percent passing. Everybody else was in the 60s or 70s. So really a unified message, I believe, overwhelming message from the community. So thank you to everybody that helped put the work together, get the message out, and that came in yesterday and supported the budget. Additionally, we had 7 people submit petitions for 3 seats we had 2 incumbents receive enough votes to be reelected, Mrs. Madigan and Mrs. Allen. And we have a new, somebody new coming on, Mr. Joyce, who's here with us this evening in the audience. So we will welcome him aboard, as we also would like to recognize and thank Mrs. Bliss for her efforts and her staunch support. I think everybody that knows Mrs. Bliss knows that she is a staunch supporter of the kids in this school district. She literally and figuratively would bleed red. So thank you.
She's not gone yet, though. She's got 2 more meetings.
That's correct.
Thank you. We're gonna do committee updates, real quick. Mrs. Allen, do you have anything for policy?
Sure. We actually just met before this meeting, and accomplished a couple of things as feedback from our last committee update, last board meeting. We're waiting on some feedback from Erie One on some policies, on some information on what policies are required by law, as far as how we should move forward. So that was the charge given to us at our last board meeting. So we're kind of in a holding pattern, waiting from Erie One on that. And then we also discussed calendaring our meetings going forward, but really it'll be dependent on the finalization of our Board of Education meeting schedule. So we're thinking we're just going to couple policy committee meetings with a board meeting, but that'll be finalized later.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Transportation? Okay. I'm assuming nothing for BOCES? Okay. Thanks for laughing about it, though. Mrs. Allen, we're back to you, Community Center.
Sure. On April 23rd, the officers of the advisory board met with school officials to discuss possibilities of different revenue streams. So that was a good conversation. And then also there's a subcommittee that's been formed to look at the bylaws, to go through and evaluate and possibly revise. The last time they were revised was 2015, so it's a good time to take a look at those and see what needs to be updated or changed. So that subcommittee is going to meet sometime in the next couple weeks to start that process.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't think there's anything for rural schools or NISBA, so if anybody doesn't have anything else, you do have something?
I do, under finance.
Oh, I'm sorry,
That's
Nancy, I
okay.
didn't mean to skip over you.
That's all right. If you recall, when we had our external audit meeting, it was indicated that the board needed to clean up the previous construction project that was overspent by the previous Board of Education and previous administration, none of which who are here right now. I just want to make sure everybody understood that. But we still have 2 meetings left in order to make that happen. And we could do that by board authorization, by having this take place in June, making a transfer from our debt service account. And it's something that would take care of our books, so we could start off 24, 25 clean.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone have anything else? Okay, I would take a motion to move into executive for a negotiations matter. Thank you, Mrs. Decker, and a second by Mrs. Kaiser. Thank you, guys.
Here she's over.